Hey everyone, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer.
And I'm Katie. Today we're going to be talking about Martin Luther King Jr. So, first, we're going to just go over a brief synopsis from the NAACP. So, all right, we'll look at his early life and education first. He was born in 1929 in Atlanta. He's heavily influenced by his father, who was a church pastor, and he saw King stand up to segregation in his daily life. In 1936, his father also led a march of several hundred African Americans to City Hall to protest voting rights discrimination. And then he was a member of his high school debate team. He developed a reputation for his powerful public speaking skills, enhanced by his deep voice and extensive vocabulary. He left high school at 15 to enter Atlanta's Morehouse College, and that is an all-male, historically black university attended by both his father and maternal grandfather. After graduating in 1948 with a bachelor's degree in sociology, he decided to follow his father's footsteps. He enrolled in a seminary in Pennsylvania before pursuing his doctorate in theology at Boston University. And while studying, he served as an assistant minister at Boston's 12th Baptist Church, renowned for abolitionist origins. And then he met and married Coretta Scott, a student at New England Conservatory of Music. So joining the civil rights movement, he returned to the South at age 25 and then became a pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Shortly after King took up residence in the town, Rosa Parks made history when she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger on Montgomery bus. All right, and then starting 55, Montgomery's black community staged an extremely successful bus boycott that lasted for over a year. He played a pivotal leadership role when he organized the protest. He got arrested, and his arrest and imprisonment as the boycott's leader propelled the King onto the national stage as a lead figure in the civil rights movement. So here's a quote from him. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We know that through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. True. I really like that quote, actually.
Yeah. I never knew, or I guess I don't remember if they brought it up in school, but I didn't know that his father was also because the article mentioned that his father was fighting too, wasn't he? Like I
Yeah.
guess I don't know if he
Yeah,
was
his dad fought for African American rights.
yeah. I mean, I guess, and
Yeah, and I
I guess
didn't.
I don't know if that means that his father was like a big leader. I guess I don't know. I don't know if it was stating it like that or just that his father was fighting like all African Americans at that time were fighting for their rights. I don't know if there was
Yeah,
like an organized movement group that he was a part of or if it was just in general. I guess that I don't know, but I didn't know any of that either though. So that's just interesting too. And again, maybe they taught us in school, but I definitely forgot then. But
yeah. I don't think I got taught that in school.
okay.
All right. And then he founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to mount nonviolent protest against racist Jim Crow laws. He was inspired by Gandhi's model of nonviolent resistance and believed that peaceful protests for civil rights would lead to sympathetic media coverage and public opinion. And then he was right, because civil rights activists were subjected to violent attacks by white officials in the widely televised episodes, and that drew national outrage. All right, and then they eventually achieved victories with passing the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So the nonviolent protest gained traction. He was a co-pastor with his father at Ebenezer Baptist Church. He's involved in the sit-in at a Department 1960 presidential election between Nixon and Kennedy. Pressure from Kennedy led to King's release. His release from prison, I guess. That's what I guess. Okay, so
Oh, yeah.
they would organize sit-ins in public spaces, and then the protests drew nationwide attention when televised footage showed Birmingham police deploying pressurized water jets. So the hoses, if you've seen those pictures,
I
that they'd
think,
spray
yeah.
them. And then police dogs against peaceful demonstrators. And then the campaign was ultimately successful, and it forced the police chief of the town, Bull Connor, to resign, and the city to desegregate public spaces. Another quote: "There's nothing greater in all the world than freedom. It's worth going to jail for, it's worth losing a job for, it's worth dying for. My friends go out this evening determined to achieve this freedom, which God wants for all of his children." So, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I see what he's saying here for sure. Um, Although I don't think you should have to go to jail for freedom. That's kind of counterintuitive. But I mean, I definitely I get what he's saying.
Yeah. Kind of like standing up to the oppressive regime. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're probably going to get thrown in. Like, in, let's
like,
say, for example, North Korea, if you were to stand up to that leadership, you would probably get thrown in jail. But
yeah,
standing
or
up to them for freedom is worth it. I mean, freedom is worth
yeah. The
fighting
free if
for.
you don't have the freedom, then what's the point?
Yes, exactly.
Like you might as well go to jail, for it.
Yeah.
That's hard though. Then he was sent to prison again, and then he composed a letter from Birmingham jail in response to a call from white sympathizers to address civil rights through legal means rather than protest. Then he said he passionately disagreed, um, saying that the unjust situation necessitated urgent action. And then that quote that we read earlier.
Couldn't it be
History.
both though, too?
What?
Like it could be protest and legal. Can't they
Yeah, I
they
don't.
could have been doing both at the same time.
Right.
But I think that the
Mm.
one people just wanted them to stop protesting is what it sounds like from
Yeah,
that.
because
Um
like if you don't have the power to do this through legal means, what else are you supposed to do?
yeah, no,
Like, I mean, you can
exactly.
do as much as you can legally, but if, legislature doesn't listen to you or, turns down what you're trying to push through, then like I mean, what can you do about that?
Yeah.
Like
And I
sometimes all you can
think
do is protest.
yeah, and protests are just a way of getting the word out there that there is injustice happening. Like it's also helpful. They help get it out there because if all you're doing is the legal way, then nobody may know about it anyway.
Right.
If that
That's
makes
true
sense.
too.
Like
Oh
protests
yeah.
are louder, I'd say.
Yeah, they bring awareness to the issue.
Yes,
Sure.
awareness.
So history making marches. So he organized the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which attracted 250,000 people to the rally for civil and economic rights of Black Americans in the nation's capital. And then that's where he delivered the I Have a Dream speech. And then he participated in the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965. The brutal attacks on activists by the police during the march were televised into the homes of Americans across the country. And then when the march concluded, he gave his How Long, Not Long speech. And then he predicted that equal rights for African Americans would be immediately granted. And then his legendary words are widely quoted today. How long, not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I mean, I really hope that's true. I'm not quite so optimistic. But I mean, maybe. Like, we'll see how things end up.
Yeah, I guess I believe it, but it's not an easy. It's I don't think it's. I think it's a long. I guess I don't know if I agree with the not long per se, but I agree that um, um good always wins. I guess maybe not right away, but I think good always prevails. I guess I'm optimistic in that sense, and morality. I think,
Yeah.
and justice is also like I feel like justice. I mean, I guess you could say it's not objective, right? That's
Right.
like,
It is
but some people
subjective.
I think see it as objective
Yeah,
or
for sure.
subject. I get some people have different
Subjective,
meanings of what they think justice is. Is what I'm trying
right.
to say. I
Yeah.
get subjective and objective confused all the time.
Yes. Like the way I think of that, I think of object is like physical, tangible. Like it's like you can't change it necessarily. Or like
Okay, and the
I think of
subject
and then subject is like the subject of what you're talking. I don't know. I just think of it as object
object.
is like the permanent. Like so, subjective would be where people have like different ideas, but there's no solid truth to it. I guess like people can have individual truths,
Okay,
but
so
objective is like there's
justice.
one truth.
So justice could be subjective then.
Yes.
Like per yeah. And I mean I guess good could also be subjective too, but
Yeah.
I guess when I say good I mean I guess I don't know like everybody is deserving of rights and everybody will have rights and people who are trying to oppress others will lose. I guess that's what I
Yeah.
mean when I think good will always win. It's the people who are trying to take power, control and oppress others, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
And in
Society.
history they usually do lose.
Yeah.
It takes
Eventually.
time and it's not a pretty journey, but they lose.
Yeah. Either they lose or the country just falls apart.
Yeah. So,
So
which and again, that doesn't make it okay, or that I'm just like it'll be fine, like because that doesn't mean that we don't fight against it.
yeah,
It's
because if we
just
don't fight, then the universe isn't going to bend towards justice.
yeah,
But usually there are people who will fight for rights. So
yeah.
because I mean they're kind of important.
Yes, they are.
So then Lyndon Johnson, after that, he signed the Voting Rights Act, and that banned disenfranchisement of Black Americans. And then his death and legacy. The next few years, he began speaking out against the Vietnam War and economic issues, calling for a Bill of Rights for all Americans. And then in spring of 1968, he went to Memphis to support Black sanitary workers who were on strike. And then on April 4th of that year, he was assassinated by James Earl Ray in his Memphis hotel. There was a National Day of Mourning on April 7th. And then in 83, Congress cemented King's legacy by declaring the third Monday of every January Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Oh, so I guess I thought it was his birthday. But you're right, it is always on a Monday though.
Oh yeah, I get. So what was it? It's just a random. Like there's no
The third
specific mean.
right. Yeah, it's just the third Monday of every January. I don't think there's a reason behind it being
Oh
that
okay,
specifically. But I think it's usually close to his birthday though. Because his
okay,
birthday's around the same time. I know that.
that makes sense. And I guess maybe so it could be like a federal. I mean, I guess you could have a federal holiday on the weekend, but then you don't get like a day
Yeah.
off from work and stuff. So I don't know why they did that. I
Yeah.
guess either, but
Yeah. So, all right. And then he was honored with dozens of awards and honorary degrees throughout his life and posthumously. And then, in addition to receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, he was awarded the NAACP Medal in 1957 and the American Liberties Medallion by the American Jewish Committee in 1965. After death, he was awarded Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977 and received the Congressional Gold Medal in 1994 with his wife Coretta. His legacies inspired activists fighting injustices. The NAACP carries on his work and strives to keep his dream alive for future generations. And then he said the closing remarks of the NAACP Emancipation Day rally, 1957. I close by saying there is nothing greater in all the world than freedom. It's worth going to jail for. It's worth losing a job for. It's worth dying for. My friends go out this evening. Oh, we read that quote. Yeah. Okay.
Still a good quote, but we did, yeah, right.
Yeah, it is a good quote, but we did read it
Yes.
before. Okay. So next, we are going through the I Have a Dream speech in its entirety, because most people just know like the few lines from it. Like, they just know the famous part.
Yeah.
So we want to read this in its entirety. All right. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Let me take a drink first. Okay. 50 years ago. All right, let me fix this. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light of hope to millions of, I'm just going to say, black slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the black still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the black is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the black lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the black is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the black people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We also have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of this moment. The sweltering summer of the black people's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the black people needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the black person is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Black community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have to come to realize that freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must take the pledge that we shall all march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Black person is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Black man's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, "For whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as Black people in Mississippi cannot vote and a Black person in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racist, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right down in Alabama, little Black boys and Black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of God shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let it ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old black spiritual, free at last. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And obviously, it's a great speech. I mean, that's why it's famous.
Yeah.
That's why people know about it. But there were some things that he did regret saying later on in the
Okay.
future. And that is what we're going to talk about next. He says, "My dream has turned into a nightmare." This is from NBC. It's hard to believe that just over 3.5 years after that triumph of telling the speech, King would tell an interviewer that the dream he had that day in some ways had turned into a nightmare. That's exactly what he said to Sander Van Ocker on May 8th, 1967. An extraordinary, wide-ranging conversation. He acknowledged the soul-searching and agonizing moments he'd gone through since his most famous speech. He told him that the old optimism of the civil rights movement was a little superficial and now needed to be tempered with a solid realism. And just 11 months before his death, he spoke bluntly about what he calls the difficult days ahead. So he's basically saying that his dream was not realistic at this point in time.
Yeah, it seems like he was more optimistic. Like in his dream
Yeah,
speech, he was more optimistic than unfortunately we are as a society at
right.
that
He was a
time
little
were
too
as a
optimistic.
society.
Yeah,
Yeah. Which it's good to be
right.
optimistic. And it's unfortunate that that was the case, that he was too optimistic, because it doesn't, like, reading that, listening to that, it just sounded like that it should have happened, like it's just always interesting that it took so long and still is
Yeah,
not really equal, really. I mean, like, it's better, but there's still things
right.
that aren't equal.
So, as the world celebrates his dream 50 years later, it is important to remember how King himself saw it in his own lifetime as a vision of a promise still unkept. So, yeah. And I think one thing that gets quoted a lot is when he says he wants children to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I think some people live in a world where they really believe that if you, even if you as an individual, so if you as an individual treat someone else by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, they think that means that, everybody, or like there isn't systemic issues that the Black community faces and that people of color in general face. And I think a lot of people use that to kind of push aside systemic racism. So I think that would also probably be something he would take issue with if he were
Oh,
alive today.
yeah.
But yeah, this is basically what he's saying is that his dream is something that is very far into the future. And that we need to fix the systemic issues if we want to live in a world like that. Like, I mean, and obviously everybody treating everyone by who they are as a person and not by their skin color is obvious. It's great. It's great if we can do that, but that's not the only problem.
Yeah. No, because I think we can do that in a way, but we still have to
Yeah,
address the systemic issues that still exist today. We can't pretend that they don't exist, Like, we can judge people based off of their
right.
character and not the color of their skin, as we should, but we still need to fix some of these issues that are
Yeah.
lingering from those days. If we truly don't feel that way and feel that these systemic problems represent who we are as a society today, then we need to
Yes.
fix them. We can't just pretend
Yeah.
that they don't exist, because otherwise we're just basically saying that we're okay with it still, and we really haven't moved on then. And I mean, we have a little bit, but we're still not There's still
Yes,
things that need to change.
exactly. All right. And then I have one more article here. This is from NPR. It's about a documentary that exposes how the FBI tried to destroy MLK with wiretaps and blackmail. So, from the March on Washington in 63 up until his assassination in 68, the FBI engaged in an intense campaign to discredit MLK Jr. and his work. Film director Sam Pollard chronicles those efforts in a documentary, MLK/FBI. So the first fear that the FBI director had was that King was going to align himself with the Communist Party, which J. Edgar Hoover was obsessed with destroying. Let's see. The FBI campaign against King began with wiretaps but quickly ballooned. When wiretaps revealed that King was having extramarital affairs, the FBI shifted their focus to uncover all the evidence of his infidelity by bugging him and taping him in his hotel rooms and by paying informants to spy on him. Eventually, the FBI penned and sent King an anonymous letter along with some of the tapes suggesting that he should kill himself. Wow, that's pretty terrible.
What?
What a,
Why are they even spying on his
to try
personal
to make him
affairs?
look bad,
Like,
basically. That's it. It's
yeah,
and
but
like
that's. I thought they were concerned about him being a communist, not
right.
about his personal affairs. I mean, I know that was all just an excuse to. Even that was just an excuse to like spy on him, but they didn't find like I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
when I think that that was our government,
yeah.
that's
And like
pathetic.
it's
Like,
from what I understand, at least what I've heard, it's kind of questionable whether he was being unfaithful to his wife. I don't know how. I mean, it could be true,
oh
I guess, but I don't know. Some people don't believe
yeah, I
that.
don't know, I guess, but
That the FBI made
but
up
that's
this
no one's business
information.
either.
Some people, right?
But it's no one's
And it's
business.
not
It
relevant to the
doesn't
work he
matter.
did.
That doesn't affect his character. Like, yeah, exactly. It doesn't affect what he was doing. Like, it doesn't have an effect on the work that he was doing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they were trying to make it sound like it was not only a former associate, but a black person who wrote that letter. He says, "This is supposed to be the nation's police. That's supposed to be doing the right thing, and this is the lengths they'll go to destroy a human being. It's awful." Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So the extent to which the FBI surveilled King, they'd go into his hotel rooms before him and his associates got there. They'd be let in by management to bug the rooms and to have rooms next door nearby where they could listen in on what was going on in the rooms. It was an all out assault. So, anytime King went to a new city, the FBI agents were on the move to get to those places to monitor and wiretap and listen to everything that happened in those rooms. And, all right, so why did Hoover want recordings of King's infidelity? He wanted to pass it on to the press, and then the press would publish it and would discredit Dr. King and his reputation as this upright Christian minister who was leading the civil rights movement. So, yeah, the press did not take the bait. They did not reveal the personal lives of those public figures. They didn't do it with John Kennedy, they didn't do it with others, and they didn't do it with Dr. King. So, on the FBI informants working in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Oh, so there were FBI informants in his group as well. That's great.
Oh, cool. I think it's good that the press didn't like. The press seems more respectable
Yeah, they
back in
would
the
have
day, at
definitely
least.
taken
I
that
mean, not
today.
the government, obviously, but oh yeah, they would. Certain organizations would be all over that. So I mean, a lot of them would, because that's literally all they don't spread news. They just
Yeah.
spread gossip and fear mongering and moral panic and yeah.
Yeah, so this mentions 3 people who were informants: Ernest Withers, the photographer,
Mm.
and he was a well respected by members of the SCLC. Yeah, and they all got paid for this. And then, oh, I guess it was just talking about this one person. Okay. But yeah, there were informants in his group. So, why the filmmaker believes King's assassination was part of a larger conspiracy. Oh, so okay, that is what we were talking about earlier. Um,
Yeah.
so any well,
Why do they
let's
think
see
that?
here. Uh, Anytime
Okay.
King and his associates went to a new city, the FBI was manned up to go in and follow him and surveil him. So, how is it possible for agents constantly surveilling King in nearby hotel rooms not to be aware of someone like James Earl Ray with a rifle who's going to shoot Dr. King? Just doesn't make any sense. And Andrew Young's answer to me was that he doesn't believe it was James Earl Ray at all. Obviously, somewhere in there was some conspiracy, which I personally think the FBI was involved in to take King out. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And there's got to be some place in some archive and some files, some tape where we will learn the actual truth. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the FBI's done pretty bad
Yeah.
things, so I wouldn't be surprised. Not that they don't do good things,
Yeah.
but there's corruption in like every form of the government. So
Yes. And I mean, back then they probably would have
right,
thought that was a good thing for because they didn't want the status quo upset, so that probably
right.
would have
They
been
want
good in
to
their eyes. But
avoid communism, which yeah, he wasn't even an advocate of
did he
communism.
was okay. I was like,
No, he
was
was
that even
not
something he
even
ever
a
brought up at
communist at
all?
all. He was like more of a capitalist kind of. He just believed in people having equal
Okay.
rights, though. So people used to think he was a communist.
Yeah. So they. Oh, some people.
And then how the opinion of King and Hoover has shifted over time. In the mid 60s, they took a poll that J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, was more popular than Dr. King. Dr. King wasn't popular back then. Some people thought he was destroying the fabric of American society. Well, that's pretty telling. If you don't want black people to vote and you think that that's going to destroy the fabric of your democracy, then it says a lot about you.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it's interesting that King has been such an iconic figure now, but he was not beloved by many Americans back then. So that's what we've got about Martin Luther King Jr. today, unless you have anything else.
The only thing I just quickly Googled this quick. So per the History Channel, the FBI has stated that at no time did it have any evidence that Dr. King himself was a communist or connected with the Communist
Right.
Party.
They didn't have any
So
evidence.
they didn't
They
even.
just assumed it because
I
he
just.
wanted black people to have
Yeah.
rights.
Uh, those large jumps that they. And I mean, like, I know they did it so that they could justify why they were
Yeah, of
doing
course,
what they were
because they
doing.
just
Like, I
want.
don't. Part of me wonders if they even actually believed he was a communist or
Yeah,
if that's just what they were saying to justify to either department heads or whoever was involved in it was using that as a
right.
justification even though it had no merit. But I feel like that can happen
Yes.
too often in this country. So that is something that needs to be kind of fixed, you would
Insane.
think, right? That's something we should all want changed, but I don't know, I
I
guess.
mean, well, that's what they're saying they're doing with Trump, though, now with the FBI, right? Right.
Clearing the swamp. I don't did they even do anything in the
Like
Communist
to
Party?
drain the swamp, you
Did
mean?
any
Oh no,
swamps
he
get
just made it
cleared?
worse.
Yeah, did any swamp?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
of
So it was
course,
all a
yeah.
ruse, a route. Uh,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
So, anyways,
But yeah, that don't have anything else to add.
All right.
So, you guys can leave us a comment below letting us know what you want us to talk about in future episodes.
You can reach out to us on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And we do sometimes do some Twitch live streams.
So, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you know when we do. Otherwise, we will see everyone next time.